Okay. All set? Thank you and welcome for coming. Welcome this evening. Today is I'm sorry, I just walked in the room.
November 27th.
Are you done, Linda?
Don't pay attention to me.
All right, today is November 27th. Welcome to the Foxborough Selectmen's meeting. I'll go over the agenda briefly. 7 o'clock, we're going to have citizens input, as we always do. At 7:05, chairman's update for a few minutes. At 7:15, we'll have a public hearing on the upcoming Taylor Swift concerts at Gillette Stadium. At 7:35, we have Randy, our finance director, and Deb Spinelli from the school committee and school committee representatives in the advisory committee to talk about the fiscal year 14 revenue and expense forecast. And so this will be a joint meeting with the school committee. At 8:30, we're going to review briefly with the town manager the special town meeting warrant articles. That's scheduled to go on special town meeting on December 11th at 7:30. And at 8:45, we're going to go into executive session to negotiate with non-union personnel. And then we have a half a dozen or so action items. So, Mark, do you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So if there's anybody for citizens' input, just ask if you could come to the microphone. Nobody? Okay. Couple chairman's updates. Just want to say I hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving. This is a time where you're going to see a lot of people in town doing a lot of volunteer work. You've already seen it on the common with decorating the trees, putting flags and banners up. And I know there's a lot of work to do with the discretionary fund as they kick into gear. So if you get some extra time, please make it known and step up. It's a nice time of year to do that. Quick kudos to the Foxborough varsity Warriors. Anyone go to that game? It was a fantastic game. It was just nice to see them win it in the last couple minutes. Football, yep. Varsity football over against Mansfield. Probably one of the best Thanksgiving games I've seen. And I just want to, just a quick reach out to Linda. She's very quiet about things like this, but she stepped up for the second run with her people, making it possible to go down to New Jersey and New York after the kind of hoopla died down with the first truck. So thank you for doing that and all the people that you work with. And I understand there's going to be some more stuff coming as well.
Yep.
So.
They're doing a gift card drive now for Christmas. So.
Yep. Yeah, and it's you know, if you read the blogs and the stuff that's going on down in New York and New Jersey, it's very heartwarming and very appreciated when we do stuff like that. So, nice work. It's in our packet in the back, not as an action item, but as an FYI. But I just want to let the town know that the special thanks to the Foxborough Planning Board and our planning director Sharon and all the work that they did. Recently, if you're aware, they went through a, what they call the DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development Program, where we applied to the state for a special approval. And what that allows Foxborough to do, Foxborough is a community that has less than 10% of our housing stock as affordable housing. So because we don't meet that criteria, it opens up the doors for kind of unchecked 40B developments where people can come in and really brush aside the zoning and the planning board regs and put mass housing stock together, which, I mean, it certainly serves a purpose, and I think every community needs it. But what this program does is allows Foxborough, as long as they meet certain requirements, like a 0.5% a year to get to that goal, and everything's done according to the regulations, we can tell the big, large 40B developments, not right now. We're phasing it over time, and this is good for 7 years. So it's something that I know the planning board not only initiated, but they worked hard to follow through. And to have this, a lot of towns don't have that foresight. I'm working in a town right now that trying to deal with one that hundreds of units coming in, and it's a drain on the infrastructure, on the school system, on the traffic. So good job to the planning board. That goes a long way. And the last topic I wanted to talk about, I haven't spoken to anyone about this, but if you recall, a few weeks ago, the Patriots organization, craft organization, respectfully said thanks, but no thanks, so we're going to hold off on their plans for future development on Route 1. And if you remember, there's, I think that we're in it with the planning board, our different committees we set up, the water and sewer. So they took a breather from that. Some people looked at that as probably a good thing because there was so much stuff with billboards and casinos, and I think they thought we needed a break. Other people thought that was a bad thing because our business partners on Route 1 certainly is the economic factor on a lot of the stuff that we do. So we can either continue to stagnate and not address it, and really it gets addressed in little bits and pieces at the table through all the applications that we have anyways. So what I've done is I've reached out through town council to kind of put a line out there to see if there's interest in talking. At the same time, they were doing it through our town council back to me. And it was nice to see that I think we do have some mutual interests to at least sit down and figure out a best way to move forward for everybody. So we can either try to do another committee, which, you know, I don't know how you guys felt about it, but it was pretty painful trying to go through this public process at the table. And there's a lot of posturing going on. What I'd like to do is reach out through our town council with Kevin, have a meeting with the craft organization as the chairman of the board, and sound it out and see what their interests are and what we think our interests are. I've certainly heard enough from the water and sewer and the planning board and this board and all the residents that I have a sense of, you know, is this something that we want to entertain and where the benefits are. After that meeting, I'd like to come back and brief the board on it. But I don't want to do that unless there's a little bit of agreement on that. I'm not sure any other way to do it at this point. So if I get a nod from that, I'd like to do that in the next coming weeks. If not, then I don't really have a suggestion other than we wait and see what happens. So,
Absolutely, move forward.
So it would be you and Dick Ellerman and Kevin?
Yep.
Meeting with them?
Yep. And then the only outstanding thing I can think in my mind is, you know, when they stopped, they said they didn't want to negotiate, or they didn't want to bring anything forward. Up to that point, the legal bills were being paid for by the craft organization, you know, the expenses, and that was, you know, public. Where they've stopped, we don't have the budget, and I don't want to ask for a vote at this point, but I would ask Kevin to reach out, or Dick Ellerman to reach out to see if that offer's there, if they pay.
That's in process.
It's in, but for future, for the next
Request is in
meeting.
process. We'll see what the answer is.
Maybe
The
not
request is
understanding.
in process,
I haven't
you've already-
requested it. What I'm saying is, moving forward, I want to make sure that we're made whole with any legal expenses, specifically Dick Ellerman's time to meet with them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So if,
I meant,
the past ones.
based on the past statements that were made, I'm going to be taking town council's bills that are attributable strictly to the discussions we've had, the support for your committee, the support for the second committee, and submit them with a request. I don't know
Okay.
if that'll be.
Yeah, so while that's going on, could you let them know that, you know, we'd like to have a meeting? And they actually already said back they're willing to have the meeting.
Right.
But what's missing is, can they pay for the attorney through the town? If not, then we'll put this on the agenda and see if this is something we want to allocate funds for. So if you could let us know
Sure.
by the next meeting. So is that okay with everybody if we reach out and do that?
Mhm.
Everybody?
Yep.
All right. What?
Yes.
All right, that's it for citizens and chairman's update. We have a public meeting starting in 5 minutes, so let's go through a couple action items. First one is the meeting minutes from October 30th and meeting minutes from November 5th.
I
Lorraine?
didn't see anything. They look good.
I move to accept the minutes from October 30th.
Second?
Motion made by Linda and seconded by Lorraine. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Reviewing of the November 5th meeting minutes.
I didn't see anything. That's all set.
I didn't have any markup.
Motion to approve the minutes from November 5th, 2012.
Just one thing.
Okay.
Diana, just I thought that Kevin had mentioned it before, that if there's someone that's opposed to something, that we wanted to put that and the motion on the, on page 2. At the bottom there.
Well, if it's
We-
3 and 2, am I supposed to put when it's 2, or is it just for 1?
I thought you wanted to put who was in the negative, right?
Yeah, you should.
Okay.
Yep,
So
the
for all-
law actually
okay.
requires that.
And I don't remember who they were, so.
What item was it?
It was the motion about,
Jim was against it, Jim and Lorraine.
No.
No, wasn't you?
It was Jim and Ginny.
Jim and Ginny?
Basically, any motion that's not unanimous,
right,
we need to list who's in favor, who's against.
Okay, so motion was made to approve, it wasn't seconded.
Second.
Seconded by Mark. If you can get the comments in from Linda, revisions, all those in favor? So 5-0. Okay. Next action item. I'm just flying through these tonight. Oh, yeah. It's in here. Oh, it's right on top. Yeah, Julie Grant is asking for request for permission to hold the annual Foxborough J.C.'s caroling on the Common on December 20th from 6 to 7. And that is Thursday night?
yep, just to make a disclaimer, I am a member of the Foxborough J.C.'s. I don't
Sing?
sit on the board, I don't sing. And I have absolutely no financial gain, but I would like to move that we approve the caroling on the Common for December 20th.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. I'm out of room.
Restaurant day.
No paperwork with this. This is just the license themselves to be signed?
And then there's, they handed this out.
Get
They
that.
gave us a nice menu in case you're hungry, James.
Was that in the packet?
Yeah, and that was on your desk.
It's on the
Ah, that's why I
desk
didn't see
there
it, okay.
somewhere.
Got a takeout order number here.
So this is a,
It's one of those
doing
turkey
business
pizzas.
as Capriotti's. That's the sandwich restaurant that's going in down at Patriots Place.
I make a motion to give the new common victorials, I can never pronounce that word, help me out, Randy.
Vitros.
License for Capriotti's sub shop to be located at 282 Patriots Place.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Any more discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries 5-0. And there's a second one for doing business at Maurice Cab of Foxborough, Maurice Bercacci. For a,
Granted a taxi cab.
taxi cab, limousine, and livery vehicle inspection. What's the motion? So,
To grant a license, new cab, taxi cab license to DBA Maurice Cab of Foxborough.
Second.
motion made for the discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
And it's quarter past.
Okay, being a little after 7:15, there is a hearing to be read into the minutes.
Okay. The Board of Selectmen, acting as a local licensing authority pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 181 and Section 183A, and Chapter 136, Section 4, Town of Foxborough Revised General Bylaws, Article 5, Section 6, and also Stadium Rules and Regulations, will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday, November 27, 2012, beginning at 7:15 p.m. in the Andrew A. Gala Jr. Meeting Room, 40 South Street, to review the application submitted by NPS LLC for the Taylor Swift The Red Tour concert. This event is proposed for Gillette Stadium. Application for this event is on file at the Office of Selectmen. All interested parties are welcome to attend.
Okay. Is there anyone here from the Gillette Stadium? Okay. I went back and forth with Dan Murphy this afternoon on this item, and I'm going to read you an email that he sent about 5:30. Kevin, I just spoke with Jim. Can you please postpone or continue the public hearing for the Taylor Swift concert from this evening to the December 18th board meeting? Otherwise, if it's easier to withdraw the application and reapply, please let me know and we can initiate the paperwork. Thank you, Kevin. Dan. So,
I move to continue to the 20th, the 18th.
okay. Motion made, seconded. Under discussion? Kevin, if we postpone it, what's the legal, if it's not answered by a certain time, it's an automatic approval unless
Yeah,
it's
but
postponed and
if
this,
you continue the hearing, then the hearing, your decision is.
and they don't have to be here, this is fine. Okay.
We're just granting their request, so.
All right, motion made, seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
All right.
Motion carries 5-0.
We're about 5 minutes ahead of time, but I don't see why we couldn't
Come on,
start
Randy.
that, right?
Yeah.
We can start
Yeah,
that.
it's not a hearing. All right, people here from the school committee and advisory committee? The full.
I don't see the school committee. There she is.
Debbie's here. Yeah, we,
Perfect timing, Deb.
Debbie, we're about 15 minutes ahead, so do you want to wait? Or do you have people coming?
My school committee members here, and I expect 3 of them, and they have to open their meeting.
Okay.
Sounds like that's the only way we'd have to.
Okay, fair enough. So let's go into the, did we go through all the action items?
Yep.
How about taking a look at the special town meeting warrant review? In your packet, you have the entire list of articles for December 11th.
You only have one article to deal with, Mr. Chairman. That is Article 6. And that is, I'm sorry, Article 5. Actually, did you take a vote on 6?
Yes.
Which was 6.
The
Yeah.
turf field?
Oh,
yeah,
that's right,
yeah.
that's right.
I was out of the room when you voted.
I thought that was the last one.
I thought that was the last one we were talking about.
No,
Oh,
we
the
gotta come
police
back
union.
to 5, because you took a vote to recommend 5, and as you know, I presented to the advisory committee and withdrew that for the reason, you heard all that. So my suggestion to the board is that you take a concurring motion to take no action on this article
On
at town
5.
meeting.
All right.
I move that we take no action on Article 5.
Okay, motion made, no action on Article 5, which was a town hall warrant article.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Ginny. Further discussion?
Can I ask a question about the post office situation, or does that have to be a separate agenda?
Well, what we're gonna do is, we took a look, Randy talked to Frank, we did a little permutating, seeing if we could use this warrant article to try to get an appropriation to do the architectural, structural studies on the post office, because that looks pretty promising. We had the walkthrough, and it looks very promising. But Frank, I believe, absolutely correctly ruled that it was outside the 4 corners, because this really says specifically Town Hall, 40 South Street. It really couldn't morph that into money for another location. You have a notice of the voters' requirement that you couldn't meet. So, it'll have to be the subject of a future town meeting. If we end up having one in that February timeframe for the sewer intermunicipal agreement with Norton and Mansfield, it could certainly be included there. Meantime, we're gonna have at least 2 or 3 months where we're not gonna be able to do much. Just had a conversation with Dick Haydecker, I don't know if he's here, where Dick offered to do some preliminary stuff, drop some things, and he has some very intriguing ideas that I found really very intriguing. And he offered to do some citizen work, and that might be helpful to us. So I told him, by all means, love to have any help he'd like to do. And but I think the formal studies that are going to be required, structural studies, concrete studies, all that sort of stuff, we're going to need some money for that. And I guess it's about 50 grand, Randy, correct?
Should be, that's what it was last time, should be less, given that we've already done the functional use program needs, so I'm hoping it's less than that.
I think it was 40, I think, last time, wasn't it, for the,
There was subsequents, you know.
after, okay.
Well, we'll firm that up and have it ready for a special town meeting, which I'm pretty confident is gonna happen because the finance plan for the regional sewer agreement is coming together very nicely. It'll be ready to present to the sewer commission in a week or two. Once they give approval, then it'll be coming to this board, then it'll be coming to AdCom, and very shortly after, you'll have a request for a special. Couldn't make December, but we just missed it. But we will be needing another.
You're talking about another special in January?
Yeah, because Mansfield and Norton are requiring notification if we are in or out in that time frame. They won't wait till the late spring, because they're doing all their appropriating. Mansfield's already done it. Norton is considering it right now. So we're gonna have to pull the trigger on this pretty quickly. But the key thing was the finance plan. It's all pretty much together. We're polishing it off. So I
So
think
maybe
you
make
can
it
put it on
an
that one.
agenda item for a couple of things coming up. We shouldn't be going
Yeah.
too deep tonight.
Well, it does relate a little bit to the
Well,
town hall, but yeah.
I think one thing Kevin said, wouldn't you want to run that through the municipal building committee before you give Dick,
Oh, yeah, the building committee's involved, yeah.
with Dick or without Dick? I mean,
Oh, no,
that's why that committee is,
I'd like to sit down with the building committee and Dick and kind of put our heads together and
that's,
take advantage of any citizen help that we can get. And here's what I'm hoping, frankly. You know, we've had a lot of division on this thing, and I'd really like to see if we can bring the parties together and work together for a change. And I think the post office gives us a real opportunity, because there was a lot of enthusiasm. We very happily invited Dick to come down on the tour that day. A couple board members came, a couple AdCom folks came, Bill, of course, and his building committee came, the architect, building commissioner, Randy, myself. And we had a very, very productive meeting, and for the first time, I think I saw a lot of people kind of coming together and coalescing around, you know, a town hall concept, and that's, I think, real promising. So I'd like to keep that momentum moving.
Okay. All right, so under the context of the town hall warrant article, there's a motion made to take no action. It was seconded. That's under discussion. Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor of taking no action on Article 5? Okay, motion carries 5-0.
And I apologize, but just so I don't have to check the warrant, so I can button this up, because I get the motions, I'm about 3/4 done. What was your vote on Article 6?
2-2.
4-0.
2-2.
All right.
We can reconsider it if you want, in the spirit of working
He's
together.
asking the chairman,
Speak a
Mr.
word.
Sullivan.
Well, no, 'cause he refused.
Mr. Sullivan was the chairman at that
I
point.
abstained, so it was 2-2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that,
Ginny and Lorraine were, voted against it, Mark and Linda for it.
all right, so the board didn't pass any motion with respect to Article 6.
Correct, because it's a push,
Okay. Okey doke.
unless we want to revisit it. Now's the time.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot.
I'm asking, does anybody care to? Okay, nobody cares to.
I'm good, Lorraine.
All right.
So a motion fails.
Well,
No, it doesn't move. It's a tie.
here's the curious thing, because I have to write these motions up, and I write your positions up. A motion to, I don't know, was it a motion to not recommend or a motion to recommend?
It's a motion to
Motion-
recommend.
Motion to
Okay.
recommend.
So the motion to recommend fails, so you have not recommended it for lack of a majority. That's what the law says.
Mhm.
But you've also not recommended it, and you've not recommended no action. So right now, you don't have any recommendation, except, I suppose, the chair, acting chair, would report the board was split 2-2. That's not a recommendation, but it's a report of your action. So,
I'll make that report.
okay, so
It's
I'll
never-
write the motion I will write the motion to reflect the AdComs. Ordinarily, I write the motion to reflect your vote, but since you don't have one, I'll write the motion to reflect the AdComs vote, but put a notation that the board took that vote and what the outcome was,
Where does that get reported?
And
in the
the,
motions.
and the one that, a individual from AdCom would read the motion on the,
So
I
you-
report it to AdCom, so they're aware of what you've done,
Oh,
and I report to you what they've done.
okay, because I was
And
gonna say,
then I
nobody
reported-
at town meeting ever,
No, and then we report it to Frank, so the night of the meeting, the AdComs report.
oh, I know what the AdCom does, but I was just
And
saying.
your decision gets reported on the floor, but I write it, I make a record of it.
Ours doesn't get reported on the floor. AdCom's does.
AdCom reads the article,
always get
and
up
they
and-
say AdCom
No, we
voted against
don't.
for or whatever.
They do. They,
Oh, I
we-
know they
we-
do.
Right,
we
we
don't.
No,
don't,
we don't.
You never do?
no.
We used to speak a lot more than the selectmen do now. Actually, I spoke to Frank about that, but we don't.
Okay.
We're not
I could've
really
sworn you-
allowed to get up there and,
No, we are
You're
allowed.
very
We're
much
allowed.
so.
I think what's
It was
happened
com-
over time is the selectmen's backed off, the advisory committee is more vocal. I don't know if that's a
Well,
good thing or a
why do you
bad thing,
take
but that's what's
positions on
happened.
articles then?
Well, sometimes.
I guess so that you can tell
sometimes it happens.
advisory what we think, but they don't really care. You know?
It was confusing back in '05.
Okay, this one's going in my book,
Oh,
because you really got me confused.
well, Kevin, this is how many meetings have you been to?
I could have
you've
sworn
seen
I heard
us.
you get up and report your recommendations.
If there's a question or,
They look an awful lot like us, but they're not us, yeah.
Well, I will tell you this, I write these motions according to your vote.
The motions,
The motions that are made at town meeting are written according to your vote. The official motion that's handed out to everybody follows your vote. Those are my instructions from time immemorial.
it's not, it's written by them.
You will report out in the affirmative
Right,
for the person or group who owns the warrant article. In this case, this
Right.
article is owned by the school committee.
right,
We will move a recommendation on that article,
right.
and then we will give our recommendation. We will move in the affirmative.
I understand. All I'm telling you is that these motions, which are the motions I write, town council checks, and I give them to everybody, including Frank, reflect your vote. Doesn't reflect anyone else's vote.
Doesn't reflect anybody's vote.
So I'm writing these for nothing, basically.
No,
No.
you're just having a motion in the affirmative for whatever
It's proposed.
that article is. And we will read that motion in the affirmative,
Even if you're not recommending it.
even if we're not recommending it. That's
Okay.
correct.
All right.
And as far as going back to whether
Well, town
board
tradition.
members should speak at town meeting on a certain article, you can speak as a citizen anytime you want. There was back in the day, I remember going down off the stage down
Yeah, but
below to
they-
speak as a citizen.
But Frank said no,
Frank Spillane said no?
yes.
I've never had that happen, no.
there was,
Anybody can get up and speak. It's typically, we've already had our debate, but sometimes the citizens are looking for more decisive, you know, I wouldn't say guidance or direction, information, and you can go up there. I mean, I've seen every selectman I've ever been on the board with speak at town meeting at the podium, and I absolutely plan on speaking on this article at town meeting. I'll guarantee it.
So, just so I'm clear, I can't believe I understand it. It's been my 5th town meeting with you. I'm writing these motions as if we're recommending them to pass. So I'm writing the motion in the affirmative.
Yes.
Even though I know, as I'm writing this, for instance, on Article 5, that both you and you are going to recommend no action.
Well, that's different. In this case, the selectmen own the article, and you want us to move no action. In that case, I believe that that the motion would state that we're moving no action.
No.
No,
the
that would be
motion
on the
doesn't.
town hall.
The-
That would be on, yeah, well, no, we're on,
he's talking
Oh,
about
turf.
Article 5.
Yeah.
He's talking about Article 5.
oh, okay.
Article
coming.
6 is the
He's
school
just gonna say,
committee.
Linda, I never said
So
that.
that should be read as the
But
affirmative.
somebody told me
Article
we couldn't.
5, where it's the town hall, sponsored by the selectmen, if we're saying no action, then that's the motion that gets forwarded, because it's our article.
That's the way I've been writing them, which means your vote is important, because your vote is the basis for the motions that I write.
If we don't vote, put some to support, we voted to put it on as an article, but then we vote whether or not we support the article later.
Right.
Right.
So there's 2 different votes that the board takes.
Correct.
So, you know, if you want to, whatever you want to do, continue to do, that's fine. It's more of just a formality at this point.
It's, yeah.
Well, let me reach out to Frank, you,
Yeah, I'll
and
chat with you afterwards, because
tomorrow, so we'll have a selectman, an advisory committee, and Frank and you, and we'll figure it out.
okay.
We don't want to confuse people more than we are doing.
Yeah. Or the town manager.
He's confused all the time. Don't worry about him.
So,
So that's it for,
yep.
that's the only one you needed.
Yeah, that's it, yep.
So we've entertained everyone for 10 minutes while we killed some time while the school committee got here. You guys all here? 5 minutes early, but you want to come up to the table? Would be good. We have enough chairs.
Front row or second?
Probably be both at this point, there's too many. Yeah, come right up to the front, that'd be good. And then where this is a joint public meeting, I think you guys need to open your meeting as well.
We do.
And then I know, we know who everyone is, but if you could just introduce yourself for the people that are just tuning in, that would be good.
Can I get a motion to open the joint
So moved.
school committee and?
I'll second
Selectmen's
that
meeting?
motion.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay. Katie Adair, Vice Chairman of the school committee.
Tina Ballinger?
Debbie,
Bruce Gardner.
Great.
Debbie Spinelli, Superintendent of Schools.
And thank you for all, oh,
You
sorry.
also
Bill.
have, since he doesn't have a microphone, Bill Yuknar, School Business Administrator, and Dr. Amy Burdos, our Assistant Superintendent.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We don't have any information in our packet on this, so
We just got this, Jim.
I'll just hand it out.
Yeah, in front of you.
right in front of you.
Gotcha.
You want like a 5-minute break or something?
It's nice if things are in the
Sandwich,
packet
a
before we get
coffee.
here, that's all.
They're never in the
Yeah.
packet
Thing.
anymore.
It used to be.
That's what we want to give
All
you
right.
the freshest information we can.
All right, you want to present?
Great. Thanks, everybody. Good to see this group gathered together again. You have two documents in your packages. This one here is the preliminary revenue forecast for FY14. You also have the financial forecast that goes out through fiscal 16. And I'm not going to cover this document. This is the multi-year plan, but this is just there. I'm going to cover some pieces of it within this document, but this is just there for your information about what the longer-term plan looks like at this point in time. But I am going to focus on this one. As I go through this, I'm going to cover it on a broad level, and I'm not going to get very deep into it. I'll get deep enough into it so you have the understanding of what the preliminary estimates look like. So I'll probably cover about 6 or 7 of the slides, but I'll really go into about 2 of them in any depth. Why don't we start off here with the first one here. This is the budget milestone calendar. I'm not going to cover this one in any depth because I think most around the table here understand the process, but at a high level, we started the budget process in November, and budget requests are due the beginning of December, and then we will compile the budgets and distribute them by the last Wednesday, or the December 19th, Wednesday. They'll be available for advisory committee. Larry, if you're going to have a meeting that night, you can let me know. We can make them available, and I can do an overview of how they've rolled up at that point, the requests. If not, we can make them available in the Selectmen's office, or I could go into detail that night on the financial forecast as well, so whatever your call is. So then in January, we start the review process. Advisory committee goes through every Wednesday night. They go through all the different departments. The school committee administration is going through and vetting their budgets, and on the municipal side, administration is going through, meeting with all departments as well over January. Then at the end of January, we get the state aid, the governor's proposal at that point in time, which is sort of the opening salvo from the state. That goes for about 7 iterations between the end of January and the end of June, but that's the first one that we finally get to see what the state is thinking in terms of aid. And then we'll roll up all of the refinements that have been made in January, and we'll meet with the Board of Selectmen in their first meeting in February, is required statutorily by bylaw, to see where we stand at that point. And then between February and March, we'll do a couple of things. We'll sort out priorities amongst all the different departments. We'll also hopefully get maybe another view as to what the legislature is thinking on state aid. Typically, we only get to see maybe 1 or 2 more cards out of the seven iterations that they go through, and then we have to take a position at that point on what the state aid is looking like at that point. And then we'll finally finalize what our recommendations are on a balanced budget by the beginning of April. The board will take a position on the recommendations, as well, the town manager's recommendations. The advisory committee will make their recommendations, and then we'll print the warrant and publish that. The advisory committee will publish their recommendations in the paper, and we'll march forward to May 13th, which is town meeting for the budget. So that's the milestones. Nothing's really different here, so no different. This is the proposed advisory committee review schedule. Again, there's nothing new here. It's the same progression. It's every Wednesday night in January. The first one starts right off January 2nd. So Larry, I'm going to defer to you to review this schedule with your committee, and you can let me know whether or not this is a schedule that works for you. It's the same as it's been every year, the same progression of departments. And then once you let me know that this is an acceptable schedule, we'll let the department heads know so they can be
We'll
on
need to
notice.
know if there's gonna be a special town meeting in the middle of that. That'll really drive our schedule.
Okay. So I apologize for this slide. I tried to do a little budgetary humor here, but unfortunately I took a PowerPoint slide and I used the conversion software to make it work just from a flash, and it didn't like this slide for whatever reason, but I always thought it was good to start these serious discussions like this with a little humor. Not as good as the ones I saw last year, but for this part, I credit hard work, ingenuity, and perseverance, and for the other part, I blame on gravity. And on the other one, I put a little ball at the end here, so it looks like we'll bounce back. Anyway, all right, let's get to it. So this is the slide that we'll spend the most.
Randy will be appearing on New Year's Eve at the stand-up in Boston.
Like tomatoes and eggs. But, what we have here is the high-level summary of the FY14 forecast, and these are preliminary estimates. So I want to make that point clear, and I'll refer back to it. But what you have this is courtesy of the building commissioner. It's on loan. What you have here is the major revenue items here: net taxation, net state aid, local receipts, other available funds. That's what comprises the dollars that fund our general fund budgets, and then fixed costs, which is debt service, benefits costs, insurances, and then the Foxborough Public Schools budgets and the municipal budgets as well down here. So the first column is FY13, which is the year that we're in right now. This is a revised estimate because a couple of things have changed for the better, because this isn't a zero down here in terms of our variance. If the budget obviously was balanced, and so our revenues and our expenses matched, and that was zero. So we've had a couple of things go in our favor here. We had positive new growth of about 133,000 higher than estimated. We also had the bond offering that we did for the library came in better than planned. We got a better rate, and we got a big premium as well. So we picked up about 50,000 there, and then state aid for the time being actually came in about $149,000 higher than our original plan. Again, we had a pull up stakes in about April, and we saw what it looked like then. We went with that number like we do every year, and then when the governor finally signed it in June, it came in a little bit better. I'm not going to move off of FY13 just yet, because we're not out of the woods on FY13. So it's great that we've got a little cushion here this year, but news that's now coming out of Executive Office, Administration, and Finance this month is that, as many of you probably are hearing, is that the state tax collections are off by about $250 million, $256 million through October. That was the trend that they were on, but now Mr. Gonzalez, the executive director, is making statements to the effect that we now may be looking at mid-year state aid budget cuts. We've been to this movie before, and Jeff Beckwith, the executive director of MMA, Mass Municipal Association, has tried to quantify what that might look like at this point in time, but of course it's all crystal balling until the state leadership gets together and figures out how they're going to balance it. They have reserves just like we do. But his estimates that are printed in this month's Beacon is about possibly a $100 million reduction to local aid, and for Foxborough that would translate into about $100,000. So the good news is that we didn't plan on using $148,000 this year of the state aid that we were scheduled to get. So even if it went down $100,000, we're not going to impact operations this year. That's what it looks like today. We'll see how it progresses. So that's FY 13. So now we'll move over to what we're here to talk about, which is FY 14 in the next column. Again, just to jump right to the punchline here, it's at the bottom. FY 14 revenue is preliminarily estimated to increase about 1.76 million over FY 13. Fixed costs are initially estimated to be about 150,000 less than last year, driven entirely by assumed health insurance changes. As the board knows, you've recently taken a vote to start down the path of implementing GIC-like, state health insurance-like plans, for Foxborough employees. And if that is achieved by September, then we would be looking at some substantial savings on the town side, and actually should be some premium savings, for employees as well. And that's estimated about 342,000. So with that, the net increase available for operating budget is about 1.91 million. And I can't highlight enough, and I've got it in red here, what's below that number, what I'm estimating to be 1.91 million in incremental dollars available for operating budgets. These numbers here, Foxborough Public Schools budget and the municipal budgets, these are proxies. These are placeholders. These are not budgets. We have not done the budget work yet. That's what we're in the middle of doing right now. So Bill and I have, taken a shot at, just ourselves what this might look like. These are not the budgets. The budgets will look different. So don't take the, this number 43 million to the bank, or the approximately $2 million increase in operating budget spend as, this is where we are. Now, we're at the starting point to develop those budgets. What we're here to really focus on is, this is what the revenue picture looks like at this point. However, based on what I just relayed to you about state aid, and I want to go through the assumptions here so you understand these major components. This number here, the state aid change that I'm estimating down by about 100,000, may go down a little bit more. So we're looking at potentially, with these estimates, about $250,000 in positive territory. That may evaporate when we see what the governor's proposal is at the end of January for state aid, and when we finally see the budgets come in December, the requests, and see how they roll up. But that's the starting point here, is that we're looking okay, but we're at the beginning of the process, and there's a lot of things that are going to change, which is the nature of the forecasting, is that these numbers do change. I just wanted to break down, what drove the changes in each of these major categories. For the net taxation, 1.283 million increase, 883,000 of that is associated with the increase related to Prop 2.5, increasing the existing levy by 2.5%. 508,000 is the estimate on new taxable growth. That's an assumption that was developed jointly with the building commissioner and our chief assessor. We go through this exercise every year to give our best proxy as to what this looks like by those who have their ears closest to the ground about what may be brewing in town, and that's what the number looks like at this point. We usually come pretty close. Try not to go over it. We also reduced the debt exclusion taxation that we needed to raise by about 70,000, and that's due to a combination of amortization of debt exclusion debt and the favorability that we had with the library offering. Of course, that doesn't help operating budgets. The fact that we're not going to collect 70,000 there, that's a direct benefit to the taxpayer, but it's just to fund debt service. But it is less taxation. And then there were $35,000 in miscellaneous increases, in combination of the overlay account and snow and ice. On the state aid, the assumption there that I went with for the time being is that the major accounts, Chapter 70 education aid, and the lottery accounts, which is the bulk of all of the aid that we get from the state, that those numbers would remain flat. That was the early intelligence that we were getting, but now it's not looking like that's going to be the case. But that's what's in here now. And then all of the other items were estimated based on trend. I look at, 3, 4, 5, 6 year trend and project them out, as the trend indicates. The reason that I'm projecting a reduction in state aid at this point in time is primarily related to the Foxborough Charter School. We get an assessment from the charter school every year, as you know, and the assumption at this point, not knowing how enrollments are going to change there, is that the assessment would remain flat. And given the way there's a reimbursement that the town receives that is tied to the change in the assessment that we get. So if the assessment goes up in a given year, we get 100% of that change back in the first year, and then 25% of it over the next several years. So assuming a flat, a flat charter school assessment, there is, and there was a big change last year. We're not going to capture a big change on the reimbursement side. Even if it went up by 100,000, it's a wash on the reimbursement side. So that's just the mechanics of how that works. So 95,000 of that $100,000 reduction in state aid is associated with the mechanics of the charter school assessment at this point in time. I will say those numbers are the ones that fluctuate the most. Out of all of the numbers that we have to plan around on the state aid equation, the charter school number does move, can move like $250,000 swings either way based on the enrollment figures, that are preliminarily provided, and then the enrollment numbers that ultimately pan out. And it actually changes from when they finalize the state aid at the beginning of the year to what we actually pay by the end of the year, as they adjust it for enrollments. That's state aid. Local receipts, I'm going to flip to another page on this one. It's an increase of $350,000 from local receipts. There's about 50 different lines within local receipts that comprise the number. What we do here is we estimate what all of the local receipts items may be, for the ensuing years, and then we only budget an amount that would then return $1.5 million to recharge our free cash. So I want to. This is probably one of the more complicated concepts. I want to flip to a page that actually explains that, which is going to be first off on page 12. These are all the detailed assumptions on local receipts. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through that, but you have it in your packets. These are there's all kinds of different assumptions for all 50 line items here, and it's impossible to nail each and every one of them, but in total, we do a pretty good job estimating what the total is going to be. It's always puts and takes. But on page 13, I wanted to explain how we derive what the local receipts number is, because there's often some confusion around this number. So the top line is the gross estimate of local receipts, all of the numbers you just saw on that eye chart on the prior page. Then what we do is we remove the meals tax revenue, and I think everybody knows why we do that, because we do not use meals tax revenue to fund operating budgets. So we strip that right out, that line here. So what's left is the local receipts less meals tax. That's the net that we're working with. So then in the out years, 14, 15, and 16, we derive the amount to put forward for local operating budgets, a number that would generate $1.5 million in what is in essence free cash recharge for the next year. So local receipts are budgeted conservatively in order to generate the necessary free cash to fund the following years. It's actually 2 years out the way the cycle works. Operating and capital budgets, $1.5 million is the annual target for this source, has been for several years. Not under budgeting this revenue source would create a significant budgetary challenge in the following year and take away the town's financial flexibility. This is, so if you think of it this way, let's say we said we're going to use the gross number, we're going to use it all, we're not going to try to generate $1.5 million. Well, in the next year, actually in 2 years out, you will not have that $1.5 million to go into operating and capital budget. So we have created a hole. And this is a practice that has started quite a while ago, decades ago. And what this practice does is it's a dose of fiscal conservatism, and it gives the town its financial flexibility. What I mean by that is is that when the hard times come, and, you know, we go through the cycles, we can then take our free cash that gets recharged, and rather than split it approximately half towards operating and half towards capital, or something close to that, we can emphasize the operating budget so as to maintain services, and we start to slow down, you know, what the investment is in capital. That's typically been the priority in this town, and that's a financial flexibility tool that we've had, and we've done that. So what you'll see is we go up the ladder on how much free cash we allocate towards the operating budget. At a peak, we've been at about $2 million, and then if good times last for many cycles, we can typically get it down to about $1 million in terms of what goes into the operating budget, and the rest can go into capital or replenish our reserves. Right now, we're at about $1.5 million, so we're sort of right in the middle. We've been coming down off the hard times, and so believe it or not, these are the good times. So we're targeting actually $1.5 million for operating. I thought I'd take the opportunity to highlight what's going on with meals tax as well. The board gets an update on this quarterly in order so they can have an eye on how the policy that they voted is actually being carried out, which the policy is that the meals tax money will only be used for the OPEB trust funding as well as roads. So fiscal 12 is our first year, but it was a stub year, meaning we didn't have full 12 months, we had 10. We collected $66,000. We funded OPEB $300,000, $75,000 went to roads. And so we actually have $292,000 that has fallen out now into free cash. There's nothing that can happen to that other than it comes forward to be appropriated at a future town meeting for one of those two purposes. This year, we're estimating $772,000. We've already allocated $400,000 for OPEB, $100,000 for roads. So assuming that forecast comes in, there'd be another $272,000 that would fall out, and so combined would have another roughly $500,000 that can be allocated towards roads and OPEB. Mark?
Randy, isn't the meals tax money, can't the board, every year, I thought we were gonna revisit that every year, how we wanted to allocate the money, as far as if it's over expected revenue stream, that we would maybe fund something else with that.
The board certainly can do that. The current policy that's voted is to fund two items, so those are the recommendations that you see coming forward. You know, to me, my recommendation is going out, unless the policy changes, is that we go up the ladder with our OPEB funding, you know, from 300, you know, go up 100,000 a year. I say go up the ladder to try to get that number up to what the annual required contribution is, or the piece that we're not funding, which is over $2 million. It's taking a page out of Needham's book. They started this years ago, and they actually moved up to a number. They squeezed it into their operating budget, where they're funding their OPEB liability at the required number to amortize that liability. So that's, but as you can see, you know, once we get out to 16, you know, we're going to have to be making some other choices if we want to continue to fund it. Although the state sounds like they're making some ruminations on how they might want to address this by addressing how that benefit is administered. And then roads, again, I just left the remainder here, but of course, those are just recommendations. If the board has other views on how you'd like to see those monies allocated, that's the board's privilege to do that.
Yeah, I think, just to clarify, we did talk about it last year. There were some members that wanted to allocate it for other stuff, and then I think we recognized the fact that every year, whoever that sitting board is could change it. So we said that's a process. We don't have to vote for that. It's going to happen. But we did leave it at OPEB and roads only.
And then when we're gonna revisit it every year, what would be that annual date? Does anybody have an idea?
Well, we're in the budget process right now, so over the next, you know, couple of, you know, between now and when we have to put the budgets to bed at the beginning of April, this would be the season.
Now, is the board able to allocate that money for whatever it sees just, or is it town meeting vote on top of what the board says?
Then it has to be appropriated. It's a local receipt, so it comes in, if you're funding it from balances that exist, like the 291 is now sitting in free cash.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an appropriation from existing cash that was generated from local receipts. What we did in fiscal 13 is we actually voted to allocate expected receipts, just like we do taxation. And, you know, so we voted, you know, based on what we expect to receive at town meeting, consistent with your policy. And one of the reasons why we didn't totally commit it is because we'd like to see a full year's, revenues, before you start, because you can always come back and reallocate this into roads and OPEB. But it's just the board's policy vote, and then confirmed by a vote at town meeting. So going back to page.
Randy, I know there's some people from the AdComs. I saw a hand
I
up.
just want to comment that, while the selectmen can make a recommendation on that, ultimately it's the AdCom's budget, and we would be presenting our recommendation on how to allocate those funds to the town.
Correct. Page 6. Seeing the future. Okay, so this is where we departed, local receipts, other available funds. It's approximately $230,000 increase. $208,000 is an increase in free cash, and $22,000 is an increase from ambulance receipts. $208,000 is to get us up to $1.5 million allocation from free cash, and the $22,000 from ambulance receipts. I have a slide on here, just like I showed on meals tax, which I can briefly, highlight the importance of what's going on with the ambulance receipts, because it has broader connotation. So if you'd like, I can just flip to that briefly. These are all the supporting schedules to look at your leisure. So here we have a 12-year history of ambulance receipts. And the reason we have a big spectrum of history here is that the primary uses for ambulance receipts are to fund a significant amount of the operating budget. We're up at about $550,000, at this point, and we allocate an amount that's a deduct from what's available. We allocate an amount that we can grow by 4% a year based on what we project the future to be. We also have ambulance replacement cycles that are 6 years apart. That's the other primary use for the ambulance receipts account. But with the change in the rate structure, with what's charged for ambulance services, you can see we had a 67% jump in receipts, in ambulance receipts last year, up to almost 1.2 million. And as you recall, the policy that we're following here is that these funds now, the excess funds, are now able to fund all of the fire capital needs. The engines and not in addition to the ambulance, but the engines, all of the other capital that they require. And as far as non-building capital, it's the most expensive capital costs that the town has. And typically, what's been happening is that we've been funding the bulk of that from free cash. So it's been a significant drain on free cash, which has sort of been starving out other capital items. So the point here is that now that we're currently up at this level, and based on what we voted at the last town meeting, to fund all of the fire department's capital needs, and some of it was sort of borrowed from free cash, but because they're on a run rate, they'll pay us back here. That this is payback, the $637,000. They should be able to, assuming that the bottom doesn't drop out of this, of the revenue, they should be able to fund all their capital needs, which means more free cash available for other capital. So that's really a major positive in terms of the town's financial condition and its ability to address its non-building related capital needs. And so I wanted you to see how significant those numbers are. And they really have leveled off this year. They're not going up at another 67%. I mean, this is the number that we're at. I'm hoping that we can hit this number. It's looking like we're just under it at this point. Maybe by about 5%, but I don't know if it's seasonal. But that's a good news on ambulance receipts. It's back to page 6 again. Better order these. So that's how we get to 1.76 million in estimated increased general fund revenues. Again, fixed costs, it's Assuming that we're able to implement the GIC-like health plan changes by September of next year, which, you know, there really isn't, outside of a lot of hard work, there really isn't a good reason that we shouldn't be able to do that. That should result in an estimated $342,000 in savings in the health insurance budget. Again, here in fixed costs is debt, so the $70,000 favorability in debt exclusion money we don't need. Obviously, it went down here where we have to pay the bill, so $70,000 less in debt exclusions. I've assumed a 5% increase in pension costs. We typically don't get that number from Norfolk County until late January, February timeframe, but 5% seems to be where we're at, so that adds about $125,000 in fixed costs. Also, this is where we assume, or we put in the OPEB commitment. So there's a $500,000 commitment to the OPEB trust here. And the reason you're seeing it here, because it's not a general fund vote, is because the source is from local receipts. That's what the asterisk is for. So meals tax comes from local receipts, and then it goes to fund fixed costs. So we're increasing the commitment to the OPEB trust by $100,000, and obviously it's offset by $100,000 of this $350,000 increase in local receipts. And then there's 5 other items based on my estimates, increased fixed costs by about $38,000. So that leaves $1.91 million preliminarily estimated available for operating budgets. Again, these are proxies. I really don't want to spend any time on them. Typically in the past, people have said, well, what does it look like? You know, what's the net? You know, if you want to see that, it's maybe $250,000 positive, but I think I've highlighted there's enough variability here with the state aid, how the budget's going to come in, that you know, we'll have a much clearer view end of January. We'll get a clear view on the requests, the end of December, refinements in January, state aid number, initial proposal in January, and this number will be different. One last thing that I wanted to highlight, given that there's been that we had a lot of discussion of, you know, about it, you know, with the boards, which is the 2 major capital projects that have been under consideration. Don't worry, I'm not going to go over this. I just want to highlight some things. And that's the town hall project and the artificial turf field project. So as you recall, I've been before the board here, I think it was earlier this month, talking about, you know, how we could fund both of those projects through included debt. And I think, as most of you know now, I've backed off that recommendation, and I want to explain why, what changed and what changed so quickly. So what I proposed earlier in the month was I identified revenue streams that were certain, which is the unclaimed, if you will, increased tax revenues, new growth, the $405,000 that we didn't use from last year, and it included debt service that was coming off the rolls. So those things alone would cover the debt service, the included debt service for the town hall project. And then with what looked like was going to be a savings or an increase in state aid, but now it doesn't look like it's going to be, would have covered all and then some of the included debt service for the turf field project. That was the revenue side of the picture. So before doing the work of the detailed work of looking at all of the expenses and how that was going to play out over the next 3 years, I had made some rough estimates without actually doing the hard work that I've now done, and I was assuming that that the expansion in the operating budgets would be about 25% less than what Bill and I have come up with as proxies at this point. So it's about $500,000 more than what I thought. I thought we might grow by about $1.5 million. At this point in time, the preliminary estimates looks like it might be about $2 million. Again, we have to do the work. So that estimated growth in expenditures pretty much gobbled up all of the revenue that I thought would have been available for included debt. I wasn't able to get this work done prior to, you know, what the timeline was to speak to the funding on the other 2 projects, but I did shared it, and that's where we are. So what the multi-year forecast shows, you know, what I've got here is I've got all the expenditures in the general fund, all the revenues that come in. I also include other sources because all of these expenditures are funded by other sources. There's a significant commitment that the schools make, over $2 million approximately annually from other sources, grants, revolving funds, and the recreation does the same thing. They commit a significant amount to fund their budget. So that's why these numbers might look a little bit different in total than what you see in the other page, includes the other sources that fund operations. But the forecast at this point shows, this number should look familiar, 255,000 is a possible positive in next year, and about 213,000 in a deficit, 138,000 in deficit the following year, and that's just baseline. That's with no included debt for those two capital projects. So that's what it looked like once the estimates, preliminary estimates for the expenses got layered in. So these deficits manageable at this point in time. They're a year and a half, 2.5 years out, manageable. So it's not a scary scenario at this point. But so what I've done is I'm taking that line and I'm showing you 5 different scenarios that I ran. So this is the scenario that we were just looking at. FY14 positive, that's what we've been talking about. 15 and 16 run into the negative based on current estimates, all in revenues and proxies, estimates for expenses. So then if you layer on the town hall and turf field projects with included debt, you can see the numbers become unmanageable in 15 and 16. And if you just look at the town hall only, same situation, turf field only, still not something I'd be comfortable with myself for included debt. These are more manageable numbers. These are more of a challenge. So the current scenario that we have right now is that's on the table is to finance the turf field with, in essence, cash assets that we have that would be used for capital items. So those cash assets do not impact the operating budget. So therefore, in this scenario, the operating budget, nets are the same as the baseline scenario because we're, in essence, taking the cash to fund the turf field, or proposed cash to fund the turf field from capital cash that would have gone would go to capital projects.
Randy?
So I wanted to explain that, and I hope that makes sense to everybody.
Randy,
Yeah.
what's the major driver of the budget basically going up $1.8 million?
Close to $2 million. I would say it's the items that preliminarily, again, these are preliminary estimates. They're not budgets behind them yet. It's salaries, expectation on salaries, is growing faster than expenses are growing. And in essence, if you boil the whole thing down, and you have all this in your packet, over here you can see I've given you 4-year averages. This is expenditures. So the 4-year average on expenditure growth is 3.5% estimated, and then the 4-year average on revenue growth is 3.4%, and that's before we layer on any included debt. So basically, you have estimated expenditures projected to grow faster than revenues.
So basically, you're saying there's going to be increases in salaries to employees.
And that, which is common.
In what world?
This one. So, I mean, that's it in a nutshell, and I'm happy to open it up to this group's discussion.
Okay. Let's just go through the board real quick, and then we'll go to the audience. Anyone from the school committee or the selectmen's table? Lorraine?
Randy, I had a question on page 11. Chris, this is what you're talking about is dropped off.
Right.
In the summary, it says about $75,000 or $70,000.
Yes.
When I look, it looks like it's going from $176,000 to $55,000, and then down to $39,000.
Let me catch up to you here. You said
Page 11, yeah, down,
So
right,
down here, there's
Debt
actually 3
interest.
pieces of it.
okay.
Debt service principal, debt service interest, and then there's override debt. So this is the
Okay, so it nets,
override debt, and then
nets
the
that.
included debt are,
So we're not going to keep that chunk set aside, basically, in the included debt. We're
no, we
eating that
tried
up
to
with
do that.
operating
We did that
budget.
2 years ago, and if you recall, we had left the included debt has been rolling off. I mean, we've been amortizing and paying it down, and it's come down by I think probably about $250,000 over the last 2 or 3 years. So 2 years ago, we tried to maintain $100,000 of included debt capacity And, you know, in anticipation that something would happen, you know, with the town hall project, and then when nothing did, as we rolled into the FY13 budget process, you know, we didn't, in good conscience, you know, we could not put that, you know, on the table to fund operations. It would seem silly. Well, it was a position that, to put downward pressure on maintaining services because of a, you know, an assumption that this project would go forward, we would use that capacity and included that. You know, that was a decision that we made to let that go, and that's the assumption going forward here, is that we're not gonna reserve that capacity within included debt that's rolling off in anticipation of funding this project within included debt. And I guess I would say, to put a fine point on that, if the estimates on expenses prove to be close to accurate, and I'm not saying that they will, but if they do, then there's no way we could fund either of those two projects with included debt without a reduction in services. So there'd have to be other funding sources that were brought to bear.
Okay. Thank you.
When the meals tax was approved by town meeting, from my memory, it was approved to be used for roads and OPEB. Did we also approve it, roads, OPEB, and at the discretion of the selectmen, if they want to have another use put in? I don't remember
I remember it clearly.
But did we?
Because initially the discussion and the recommendation that was made, I believe by Larry at town meeting, was for a third use was to also include debt service on major, you know, major projects. But then when the board ultimately you know, voted on that, that was removed, and the vote was specific to those two items. But again, the board, I think, said when they took the vote that the board could always revisit it, you know, based on their priorities.
Yeah,
So that's how I recalled it being presented also, and we had that debate, and, you know, most of the members on this board were present when we voted that. It was only going to be considered for OPEB and roads here, but it's not what was presented at town hall.
Oh, okay.
At town meeting, I'm sorry.
Right.
But we also
you.
voted to
We
revisit
can
it
revisit it, yeah.
in the years to come.
With the idea that it will always be capital or one-time,
Yeah,
not
in the operating.
operating, never in the
That we
operating.
all concur on.
Right.
Kevin, you had a comment?
Just the slides which were used for the presentation that night, I preserved them. And they clearly demonstrate that the suggested use was OPEB, roads, and other uses to be determined later of a capital nature.
Right.
That was a key thing. We promised it would never go into the operating budget.
Okay.
The board, subsequent to that, adopted a formal written policy which excluded anything other than roads and OPEB. However, that is entirely up to you. That's just your policy. It's also important to note that no town meeting action can legally bind a future town meeting. That's a principle of law. That's inviolable. So, irrespective of what one town meeting indicates, you cannot bind a future town meeting by one town meeting's decision. So, if town meeting wants to change that in the future by recommendation of the AdCom, recommendation of the Board of Selectmen, a recommendation from the floor by a citizen, town meeting can do whatever it wants. It's all purely advisory.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else from the school committee or board?
Jim, I would just, first of all, thank Randy for putting together the package again and the calendar, which I know from history the last several years has worked quite well. And also thank Randy and Bill for their initial estimates. It just occurs to me that while things aren't great, we continue to be fairly fortunate in this town, especially compared to some things I'm hearing in other towns.
I concur.
You know, what I take away from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the major issues or biggest things we have to solve continue to be OPEB and salaries. And if I read the presentation right, we do that without bankrupting us looking down the road. So I'm pleased with the progress on the OPEB nut, and also know that one of the challenges we have in front of us is on the school side is a negotiation again with our group this year, and it looks like this helps us with that. So. So I'm encouraged, I guess, by how this looks. As it relates to the turf field, you know, we continue to be interested in that as a school committee and supporting that warrant item. primarily because we want to take advantage of the dollars that are available to us through the NFL grant. And again, I'm pleased that it looks like you've found a way to at least support that going forward and still maintain a reasonable expectation looking out at the next couple of years. So that's encouraging too. So that's my reaction to this, Jim. The one question I guess I'd ask Randy is, I know the public's concerned about tax rates, and you've put in a couple projections about FY 15 and 16, and I think if I read one of your pages right, it's also with the assumption that the tax rates hold steady in those couple of years. Is that true, or am I misreading that?
It's the presumption is that in an effort to live within the confines of the revenues that the town has, that the town would, over this projected time frame, continue to tax to the levy limit, meaning increasing the levy by 2.5% per year. So in that scenario, taxes will rise. The rate is just a balancing factor. It balances out how your value changed. But I think the takeaway is that in this scenario, there's, to maintain the services, that I think we're trying to maintain, unless there's policy direction to shift away from that, then taxes would continue to rise.
Okay, thank you.
Just make a comment about the fact that, as you said in the beginning, we're in the beginning of the budget process, so we have work to do, and I know that you and Bill are working closely together. I think that this is extremely helpful for us, but I think, of course, moving forward, as you said, it's a moving target too at times, so we have to use this as a guide. We need to continue to be fiscally conservative, and as you've done in your projections, so I think, certainly the school committee will continue to keep focused on that, as well as we hear about our different departments and the budgets that are going to come forward to us. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And as I think the group knows, as we get major new pieces of information, the first one meaning the roll-up of the budget requests, I'll update these documents to reflect how that looks, and then the next major item will be the state aid that the governor proposes at the end of January. I think at that point, we'll have a good sense for what this is starting to really shape up, like for FY14, and then we'll start to make the refinements.
Great. Anyone else on the table?
Can I, just one more? Given the water and sewer situation in that town meeting, can we consider doing the special town meeting in March, so that, because when you look at this calendar, which takes up all of January, I'm not sure how AdCom could really study the water and sewer proposal at the same time.
I think the answer to the question is the timing, we're not driving it. It's Mansfield and Norton that are driving it. So can we go to March? I certainly would hope that, if we were needed time to do that, that Mansfield and Norton wouldn't make any precipitous decisions to exclude us. I mean, basically that's what's at stake. If we don't, agree to a reasonable timetable to get it clear who's going to do what, then those two towns could go off on their own. Mansfield could go off on its own. I don't think that's likely for the matter of 30 days. If we decided we really didn't want to cram, a special into February and make the job impossible for all of us, I can't imagine they'd have an issue with that.
Okay.
All right, John.
Could you jump to CIP real quick?
Sure.
It's
It's on the
CIP.
The one that this one here?
Yeah, you can't read it, but could you explain the overlay surplus, the unable to fund from free cash?
Sure.
Negative 850, and that flows right down to a deficit of 850.
Exactly. Thanks for highlighting that, John. I kind of glossed over the CIP here. So this is, again, the executive summary page on the multi-year forecast. Up above the gray line is the operating budget. Down below, I roll in the capital plan as well. So we have history here, FY08 through 13, and then going forward for the next 3 years, 14, 15, and 16. What I have is I have the 5-year capital plan that we had landed on back in March, and then I updated it to do a couple of things to, in essence, move out the town hall project not to, take it off the map, but with the understanding that based on the way things are looking, with these projections, that it could not be done with included debt. So if it were to be done, would have to be other revenues or excluded debt. So typically, if there's going to be a project that hasn't been voted forward yet and it's going to be excluded debt, I don't include it here. Just like we know that there'll be 2 school projects coming forward. All we're showing here is the sort of the seed money to get that going. But when those projects come forward, it's highly likely that those would be excluded debt projects. But because it's a wash with the taxation, the raise don't show it. So that's the one change from the 5-year capital plan. And the other change is that I've assumed, within the school capital, is the turf field project. So I placed that in here because that's the current proposal going forward to town meeting, and then lined up the funding sources within this column that we've talked about, the million from the high school project, money from the overlay, and money from other revolving account from schools. So to your point here about what's this here, so this $850,000 negative. So what I do here, the plug, and again these are projections on how to finance all of the capital that's in the plan. Is free cash. So we identified all these other sources that are reasonable to fund the capital with, and then the plug is how much free cash do we need in order to balance it. So in FY14, based on everything that's currently listed in FY14, as capital, a lot of which will probably not get done because we don't have the resources to do it, or they're not a priority anymore. So what I do is I make an estimate to what would have to be reduced at this point in time. Of course, the committee has to meet and make their own conclusions, but I make an estimate of how much we would have to reduce what currently sits in the FY14 capital column, that was the request that was made last year, to get to a number that would be sustainable. We could use free cash that we had, so that nets out to about $1.2 million towards capital from free cash at this point in time. The committee may have a different view. And then what I've done is I've noted here that 500,000 of that, if those are still priorities, could be funded over the next 2 years, but you still wouldn't be able to do it all. That's a consistent theme with the history of the town's capital, capital list. We've always, we've never been ahead of the curve on capital. Again, because when we flex, as I mentioned before, with what we put forward from free cash, what we do is we end up deferring capital needs in order to maintain the operating budgets and the service levels. What we tend to stay away from is borrowing for these, what I would call for municipal government, small ticket items. And we typically don't, borrow for school buses or a highway truck or something like that. We're Yankee conservatives. We like to pay cash for that stuff, and if we don't have the cash, we defer it if we can.
Randy, just based on this scenario, including the turf field in CIP for fiscal year 14, would that mean that other items on the CIP wish list would be deferred once again?
I think the best way I can answer that is that there's, I think what we've cobbled together is $1.2 million of, cash that the town has in various, three accounts, plus, 400 and some odd thousand of other private grant and donated services. So the best way I can answer your question is that's $1.2 million in cash that is, is available and would be recommended to be used for capital. And right now, the question that's at hand and is being put towards the policy boards and the voters is the turf field. So it's a priority question. It's a priority decision that the policy boards and the voters need to make.
But it's not running through the normal channels of CIP review. Right.
Well, it should. I mean, there needs to be a CIP committee meeting in order for it to march ahead to town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Debbie? I'm sorry, Larry, you
We're
did
probably
have.
going to both be making the same point, but go ahead.
I mean, the answer is no.
Right.
The $1 million can't be used for other capital resources. Can't be used for trucks and stuff like that.
No, but it can be used for other building projects.
But
Right,
I think the question, right, the question was
what
about the wish list. So when we meet to do capital, we can't, that 1 million that the school committee can vote to go forward cannot be used for the, I'll say the smaller capital items that we typically vet
It would be
on an annual basis.
It would be a building project, so it could be, I mean, I'm not suggesting this, but I'm saying what, the options are, spend it here, certainly have the right to do that, or, if the priorities are, well, we want to make sure we have $1 million for the Borough School, the Taylor School, or the Town Hall.
That's different. But I think the way I heard the question was, can that $1 million be used toward the capital wish list, which is what we typically
Yes, because
call
those 3 items are
that-
on the wish list.
But most of the items on the wish list are not that, so.
But those are
Fire
the
trucks,
those are the 3
buses,
that we know that are coming.
technology.
That are on the wish list.
Okay. Larry?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to reiterate what John said, and I don't really understand. We have a prioritization process, the CIP process, and I assume since this is your article coming forward, that this is your priority. And then if that's true, then, what effect does that have on your scenario here?
As I said, it doesn't, because it's coming from, cash that would be used for capital.
Right.
It doesn't impact the operating budget, which is what we're focused on here. It's a priority question within the capital budgets, and not FY14. It's a priority question, over the 5-year capital plan.
But at the very least, then, it would be a different funding source. We would keep the $1 million that we could then apply towards a town hall or the borough school.
I mean,
Right.
that's an option.
Right, okay. I mean, I think that's the gist of your question.
That's the trade-offs that we're
Right.
making, or we're
And it doesn't
contemplating
seem like
right now.
we're discussing those trade-offs yet, but.
Well, that's
If I can interject for a minute, I think we're way off line here on what the agenda stands for. You're going to another project instead of what we're studying. All due respect, this is about a budget that's laid out here, and you're talking about, now you're putting on an agenda, a discussion that is turning into.
Mark, I was trying to understand the line item.
I understand that, but
and
now
we-
we're going to
No, but-
talking about other projects that aren't on the.
But
I'm
as
just
part
an
of the
air of
budget,
caution, letting you know.
As part of the.
Could you let me
FY
finish, Larry?
Go ahead.
An air of caution, it's not an agenda item to discuss a town hall, a turf field, I know, but it's leading to that, is what I'm saying to you.
I want to know
Or-
what the parameters are around the CIP budget for this coming year. That's.
But
what-
we're not there, we haven't got there.
A couple of things. One is, I think the point was made, is that, for the project that's being proposed for December, the capital project, the CIP committee does need to convene before December 11th, to consider that project. And then beyond that, barring, anything else that is unforeseen, the meeting in March that we've listed out in the calendar would be where, all the current capital requests, would be considered.
But what I'm trying to say is, this says we're discussing here. I'm just trying to say, we all have enough heat from running off topic here or there by indirectly doing that. I'm just trying to make sure that doesn't happen. It's got nothing to do with whether you're for or against it. I just want to stick to the agenda.
George?
You've mentioned before that the tax rates are gonna go up by 2.5% per year.
Not the rates, the tax levy.
Exactly.
Unless the votes are different, then we want to reduce it.
Randy,
Forgive me for a minute.
hold on a second. That's a topic that comes up every year, and
Right.
it's a little confusing, because can you just spend a minute
Sure.
saying what's the difference between a tax levy going up 2.5%, all that? And then we'll get back to you, George, because I think it's important for everyone to understand what 2.5% means.
Right. Thanks, John, I appreciate that. Actually, I think that probably the best way to explain that would be right here. This is one of the detailed schedules that we have. So the 2.5%, because we're looking ahead to FY14, the base tax levy, based on, what's already been certified by the Department of Revenue as our levy, the base tax levy going into next year is $35.3 million. That's our base levy. Under Proposition 2.5, the town is allowed to increase that base levy by 2.5%, which in this case is $883,000. So the town is allowed to do that, and then how that, of course, it's a policy decision. If the policymakers in the town meeting, voted to not to do that for whatever reason, and we're going to have to, reduce services, that's a position, that's an option. hasn't been an option in this town. This town's been trying to maintain the services. But as that relates to this question about rate, here, what goes up is the gross levy. The rate and then value, taxable property, the value of the property, those are the balancing equations. So we know that we have to raise this amount here, because then you have to add in new growth, debt exclusions, the rounding error, so we have to raise approximately $40 million. So that's what's going to be raised, and it includes a 2.5% increase on the levy. So how that gets apportioned is a function of the work that our chief assessor sitting in the back and her board does in valuing all the properties. So we have this pie of 40 million that has to be allocated. And based on your home or your business's pro rata percentage of the pie of value, you're going to get that $40 million allocated to you. And what the balancing factor is in the math is the rate. And if values happen to be increasing, then the rate would typically go down if the math works, and if values are decreasing, then the rate would typically go up because you still have to levy this gross number. I know it's still a confusing topic, but
that helps. Go ahead, George. I'm
I
sorry.
have two questions. So, one, is the levy allowed to go up 2.5% or go up to 2.5%?
Up to 2.5%.
So you misstated it before when you said we increase it by 2.5. We're permitted to increase it up to that. We could certainly, or you can propose only a 1% increase or a 0.5%.
I don't propose.
Well,
Or it could stay the same, or it can go down.
Well,
That's
okay.
every year, yeah.
That's question one. The second question is, I was at a meeting of the Board of Selectmen a few weeks ago with the assessors, and I think a statement was made that the residential taxes will be going up by 7% next year.
No, that was if we reverted back to the to a single rate.
So what will the residential taxes go up? Not 2.5%?
The average increase will be about 6%.
So residential taxes will go up 6%, not 2.5%, not the other numbers you were quoting tonight.
Well, I think that's why I wanted him clear. I think he's correct in what he's saying, but
I just
different-
wanted to see if my memory
different
was
context.
correct.
It's most people assume their understanding of Proposition 2.5 is that well, my taxes can only go up by 2.5%. It's the gross levy that goes up by 2.5% if it goes up by 2%. But if your value increases, at a higher rate, you're going to get a bigger percentage of the share. And if we layer on at the ballot box, more debt exclusions, like we have in the library and the public safety and the high school, then the taxes go up beyond 2.5% by whatever that amount is, pro rata over the value of your property.
Understood. And likewise, if we don't scrub down the requests and eliminate waste, it's gonna go up more than it could have otherwise.
Sure.
And Randy, that 6% includes exactly what? That the average tax is going up 6%, includes debt exclusion?
Yep,
and-
debt exclusions,
Just to make that clear.
it's new growth, it's the 2.5%, it's debt exclusions, and it's new growth. But because we also shifted the
Right.
because we also shifted the split back more towards residential, we didn't maintain the split that we had. That had an impact as well, that drove it up from what would have been about a 5% increase to about a 6% increase, the shift that was chosen.
Right. And I think it's important to add to your discussion, is that a lot of people don't understand, it's not the value of your house or your property that goes up 2.5% if we levy to the 2.5. It's the assessment of the whole town. Yes, you're shaking your head. It's the assessment of all the properties and then divided amongst.
Exactly.
So if you have a $400,000 house and your neighbor has a $1 million house, and the average is 700,000, then, or 8, whatever, you're at 2.5% of that. So when somebody sells to you, it doesn't matter that somebody on the other, people are building more luxury homes, per se Westwood, multiple houses getting knocked down, making very expensive mansions, and you're over here on the other side of town. You're getting a burden from that. just, because it's the total levy.
I think it's very straightforward. I look at my tax bill for this year, I look at my tax bill for next year, I divide one by the other, and I get my percentage increase. That's mine.
Right.
Not what the town gets, that's mine.
Everybody's mileage will
And-
vary.
And you're saying that's gonna be 6%.
The average for residential, based on the dynamics that we have, levying to the limit, the debt exclusions that we have, and the tax, the split rate that the board chose, that results in an average increase for residential taxpayers of about 6%. For next, for this year, FY '13.
Anyone else from the audience? Kevin, you had a comment?
Just, my wife accuses me of having a very simple brain, which she's probably absolutely right. And this is pretty simple. The size of the pie, the tax levy, is gonna go up by a certain percent every year, 2.5, if we let it, that's the max. And whatever we vote for overrides, we add on. But each homeowner's piece of that pie is based on the value of their home, proportionate to everybody else's value. So if your relative value goes down, your piece of the pie goes down if somebody else's goes up. It's as simple as that. It really is as simple as that.
People focus on the rate, but the rate just is the number that balances the equation.
And that's based on 2 years ago assessment.
What's that?
The assessment on the tax rate is based on 2 years ago, and we do a reassessment this year coming, correct?
Yeah, 2 years, a year and a half to 2 years, yeah.
You are right, it's 2 years back.
You had it nice and simple, now you're making it complicated.
Well, I just want to make that clear, because a lot of
Yes, you're
people's
right,
values
yep.
went down and their properties went down.
Right.
You can't use that for 2 years.
Yeah, and that's by state law, it's not by Foxborough's,
Right.
Choice, it's values, fair cash value, as of January 1st of the prior fiscal year.
Randy, just a couple, and I appreciate what you did. You're flying 100,000 miles above, and we're kind of at 20,000. You've got the charts in the columns and rows. Can you just take a step back and just give a general broad, I know we're looking at 14, but a general understanding of how's our bond rating, where's it gonna go?
Sure.
Health insurance, the work that we've done, are we going in the right direction? Just so the average person that can't see the numbers or don't follow the 15 pages of numbers, kind of a state of the state of Foxborough right now.
Sure.
And I don't want to put you on the
No, that's
spot,
great.
but I think it's
appreciate you
important.
asking that. It's an important question. I think it's been talked about in various ways over the last couple of months. The good news is that based on our history up until now, is that the credit markets, investment community, views little old Foxborough. I say little old Foxborough because this is a relatively smaller municipality compared to many of the other municipalities and cities, and with what we have, meaning no general override money like the majority of the communities around us, the rating agencies have given us a very high rating, AA+. I mean, the highest we could get is a AAA. We will never get that. You need certain socioeconomic demographics to get that, and we would need massive cash reserves beyond what we have. So we've overachieved. Meaning our fiscal conservatism over the years, combined with the good fortune that we've had with the development that's come into the town, the proactive steps collectively taken by everybody here in this room, trying to manage our liabilities, the OPEB liabilities, the way we've approached contracts, labor negotiations. Again, labor or salaries is the biggest controllable expense that the town has. Of these numbers that we're talking about here, over 60%, 61, 62% of all of the dollars that go out the door out of the general fund is all related to salaries. So that's a key reporting item when we have to disclose, where are we with our contracts, what are the wages, and what are the increases that we're giving. So in essence, the town has decades-long practice of being, fiscal conservatives, and as far as like the debt that we've taken on, I know there's been a lot of talk about the debt that the town has taken on with regards to the important projects, the buildings in the town. the fact that that we fund them the way that we do, that the people, the voters here in the town go to the ballot box and the majority, vote to support the increased debt burden, with incremental taxes, that's viewed as a big positive, that the community is willing to step up and the bondholders feel, protected because, that money can be collected, it's not at risk. So everything that we've been doing, when I have to explain to the rating agencies, how we manage, and they ask all the questions. What are we doing with health insurance? What's going on? How are we funding our liabilities? What are we doing with salaries? How are we managing our capital plan? They cover all the bases, and you can read the rating. It's online. It's on the website, and it's been positive. I will say, that's no guarantee of future success. It's hard work every year. It'll never be easy for this community. It'll never be easy. I wish that was going to be the case, but it's just not. Every year we've got to go through this hard process, and it's ultimately it's priorities. I think what we're starting to hear is, ideas on priorities, and that's natural. That's the process. That's how it works. And this town historically has done a fantastic job at balancing its priorities and living within its means.
Thank you. And just one last comment on the town hall project. I appreciate you publicly backtracking on the pluses and minuses. If you can step back, if you remember last year, we voted in favor of the town hall to a point, but we weren't in favor of the finance plan because it was selling the fire department and it was selling some land that was tied up and perhaps with conservation. So I think that avenue of doing that plus the traditional bond that we usually do of 20 years and just write a bond and like the library and the school did. I think we pushed you away from that, saying that's a little risky, and can you try this formula? So, going through taking nickels and dimes from the whole budget, it's tight, and it showed us that maybe it will work, but maybe it won't. So I think, I don't fault you for going through that exercise. I think we needed to do it.
I wouldn't have gone, we wouldn't have gotten to a town meeting to vote on funding this building, whatever we're going to do with this building, without me having gone through this exercise. Wouldn't have allowed that to happen. It's just, I wish I had it all together at the same time at the beginning of the month. But
but it's good that we found out. But it also shows that if you look at the pages of spending, and people say get rid of the waste, get rid of the waste. If there was waste, you would have. I'm sure there isn't any budget, but it's not jumping out that we're in a fat situation right now that we can just pull from all these different places, and maybe that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing, but as a result, we struggle when we have projects come forward, and I think that's what we're seeing.
Great.
All right. I think at some point we should end it. Is there any more? You have a question? I see it. No. Anybody else?
I have a question for you folks. So, underlying this presentation that Randy just gave are literally hundreds of assumptions about revenues, expenses, et cetera. The biggest question that we're looking at right now that needs a little policy guidance from you is, and in a different way the school committee will deal with the same question, we have needs. We haven't increased the operating side of the budget pretty much at all. I think we did one school position last year, 2 town positions. Prior year, we didn't do any new positions. Year before that, we didn't do any new positions. So we haven't, in any measurable way, increased services to the citizens in 3 cycles now, 3 budget cycles. I think we're all aware there's a lot of demand out there in a variety of areas. And what this basically tells you is that if you want to look at increases in operating budget services, it is possible. Very modestly, but it is possible. On the other hand, if you want to create margins which can be used in the future to support the town hall project or other needs, then we can't do that. We really need to be very conservative in the budget this year and not put new pressure on the operating budget. I'm about to sit down and write a budget. The superintendent's about to sit down and write a budget. 4 or 5 weeks from now, we'll be handing those budgets to our respective boards for review. It would be helpful, I think. I don't mean to speak for Debbie, but I think it probably is obvious, it would be helpful if you were to give us any guidance you'd like to give us on any subject, but particularly on the subject, grow the operating budget or not. In other words, this is the proverbial, and I know Randy already warned me, don't say it, you'll hate yours. This is the proverbial level services, I'm not gonna say the other word. Here it is, it's, do you want the budget to grow? Do you want to increase services to the townspeople in any area? Or do we want, because we can't do both, that's what this basically says to you. We can create margins for future capital, or we can increase the budget modestly. What would you like?
Well, let me just start out, and then, yeah, it's kind of unfair to put it at 8:45, that question, because it sits there every year.
Well, you don't have to answer
No,
it,
let me
but
just-
you do
yeah.
need to ponder it.
The questions that are out there every year are level service versus
Yeah,
level
I
spending.
didn't say that, because there's a lot of confusion.
Percentage of the school versus percentage of the municipal. And if it's not spoken here, it's spoken at the advisory committee meeting. And I think last year we had a separate meeting just to talk about that. At the end of that exercise, because level service was important to people more so than level budget. I'm certainly willing to entertain if the school committee and the advisory and the selectmen want to get together. It's more than a few minutes discussion here
Sure.
off the cuff from a presentation, but,
I just mention this because it's important, every year, we don't do that. We don't do a very good, effective job at that, frankly. And so every year, Debbie and I do what we agree. Bill, Debbie, Randy, and I agree on these assumptions. We go through it in huge detail, and we agree on these assumptions. What we don't know is if you all agree on these assumptions, and if this is the way you want us to write a budget. Absent any further instruction, Debbie and I will write budgets according to these assumptions, and we'll bring them back to you. What I don't want to do, and I'm sure Debbie doesn't want to do, is write budgets that reflect different priorities if you have them, and we don't know.
I'm just going to absent myself
Sure.
from that because we have a school board and they're responsible for their budget.
Yeah.
We do have a budget subcommittee, actually, that Bill and I have been working with, which happens to be Bruce and Katie. And we discuss our budget philosophy, and when we put forward the budget to the full committee, which will be on December 17th, that's when, we'll start the discussion about budget philosophy and what they want to put forward and what it represents. And then we wrap it up by the end of January. It really is a time-held tradition that seems to have worked here. So our plan is to follow that same thing. We already have had individual meetings with our budget subcommittee members, and we're going from there.
Well said.
Go ahead. Had your hand right up, quick. Go.
Well, I agree, we have to have a longer discussion about it. Maybe we could do it at our next meeting, because you are going to be starting to work on your budgets. But, right away, I think of the story that was just told of fiscal conservatism and how we have always historically paid for major projects out of included debt, where that is dropping off.
Excluded. Excluded. Major buildings have primarily been excluded.
Excluded. I'm sorry. So where we have done other funding, though, with included debt, and that is trailing off now, I think we're losing some of that conservative edge if we don't consider looking at that as a potential source for some of these upcoming projects, because historically we've always had downward pressure on our operating budget from that, and why stop now? It's kept us in good shape all along. Why stop now? So I just want to throw that out there.
Linda?
Just, I don't remember if we did it last year, but we have in the past invited a public meeting about the budget, and maybe, we do that again, because that's really where we got the answer. I won't say the two, I won't say it either, Kevin, but, it's out there, and folks do come to that meeting, and I think it's important that, the public kind of weighs in on how they feel about one or the other.
That was on a Saturday morning, I think we did
Yes, so maybe we could think about that.
That was helpful.
Yeah.
I'd just like to make one comment. I think, I could speak for the committee, but you can certainly chime in, is that I think the school committee has really focused on a student-driven budget. And I have complete confidence that we'll continue to do that while we're being certainly mindful and conservative of the information we've gotten tonight. But as Debbie stated, I think our process works pretty well, and I think we'll just, we'll continue with that, unless either of you have another comment. And certainly, we'll have further discussions with this board as well.
Okay. So you guys want to close your
Yes, I'd
public
like a
hearing?
motion.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, aye, aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for
Thank you very
coming. I
much for
appreciate it.
inviting
Thanks
us.
for your time.
Thank you to Randy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Randy.
Randy.
Randy, thanks.
Thanks, Ray.
Good job.
We're supposed to drive 5 hours one way, but we can.
All right, so our meeting is still in session.
Yeah.
I think we went through all of our items.
Yes, we did.
Closing comments?
Just, at some point on our agenda, if we could put, the discussion, I don't know if Kevin's had the meetings yet for the firefighters, not the fire, just the fire, I'm sorry, the advisory committee.
Folks.
The insurance advisory committee meeting that you were gonna set up, has that been done? And
No,
if you can
we're
give us-
still pulling all the exhibits together.
Okay.
There's about yay much material that's got to get pulled together.
So at some point, if we could put that
So
on the,
we're still working on it. At this point, I suspect we won't try to do the meeting before Christmas, just because we're going to start losing people to taking time off.
Yeah.
But
I just don't want that to kind
Oh,
of.
no, no, don't
fall
worry,
behind.
that's not, that's definitely moving along, yeah.
Yeah, there's at least a month and a half right now of meetings that are out. And they start to get light near the end. I know there's that, the other, I still want to get, I forget who's responsible for the Strong Town Managers Act review.
Right.
We need to get that going, it's been too long. And there was one other item that has been lagging. So what I'll do is I'll send the agendas out to everybody so everyone can see what it is, and then email me back when you're ready to put that on there, or when Kevin's ready, and we'll fill
Yeah.
it up. But we've been meeting every week, too. We're meeting
Oh, I know,
on December
I
3rd,
just
so,
don't want it to,
get lost. Yep.
because,
So we are plugging it away. Actually, we're meeting also tomorrow with the DPU and the National Grid people. Kevin, you're there, and I think the fire chief, and we're gonna sit there, and hopefully we can get that on the next agenda, too, to come up with some type of
what meeting is
update.
that? I'm sorry.
After the Hurricane Sandy, not Irene.
I just, were we supposed to go to that?
No.
Oh.
We just reached out. It's a small meeting with the president of National Grid, Marcy Reed.
Yep.
DPU, her overseer at the DPU. Mark's gonna be there, Kevin, the fire chief, Bob, Russell, and maybe a couple other people from National Grid. And basically, we're just gonna say what's happening with the union, educate us, and let's work together better. So I'm just mentioning that because these things are on the list, they're getting done, but there's still openings on the agenda in the next couple months, so. Okay, that went off in a direction. So it's 8:45, we're scheduled to go into executive session. Do we have a motion to close the?
Actually, that's not needed. The material that we were going to do isn't ready, unfortunately, so I don't have anything to report to you.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made second, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, have a good evening.